You are listening to the new man beyond the macho jerk and the new age wimp. Your host is men's coach Tripp Lanier.
Is it bad to be a powerful man these days? Why can some guys flirt without being offensive? And what can you do if you're strongly attracted to someone but afraid it's going to get you in trouble? Sex, power, desire. In the wake of what's been happening recently, more and more men are afraid their sexual turn-on is going to get them in hot water. But is repressing that desire really the best way to deal with it? And can we learn how to own our sexual power without becoming a harassing macho jerk? Shana James spends her days helping men find real power to create better relationships, careers, and legacies. Today, we're going to discuss what's possible for those of us who want to be an ally to women without living in fear. Let's talk about power. There's a shit show going on right now between the men and the ladies.
Major shit show.
What do you see through your lens? Because you work with men primarily. You've worked with women as well, but you really got this sweet spot of working with men, specifically around power. And if you just say powerful men, that's a pretty polarizing statement for some people. People get scared of this idea of powerful men because they assume that means they're going to have power over somebody, that they're going to assert their power over somebody. It's going to be sexual, or it's going to be happen in the workplace, or that kind of thing. And so when I'm just curious for you, when you tell people you help men step into their power more, people look at you like, are you crazy? That's the whole problem in our culture, is because men don't understand how to use power.
Right. Well, to be honest, as you said that, I was like, do I even say that? I don't say that because I think I'm afraid of the response, right? But I think that there's such a misunderstanding of power, right? Like when I look at what's happening in the world right now with the Harvey Weinstein, the Louis C.K., Charlie Rose, Matt Lauer. I mean, right, we can go on and on and on. It seems like because these men have a lot of power, that, there's an abuse of power, right? But ultimately what I think is that it's actually coming from a place of powerlessness, or that feeling inside of, I don't have the power to actually have the connection, the affection, the intimacy, the love I want. I don't know how to get it. I don't even know if it exists. I don't know if it's possible. When I even try to talk about it, I'm shamed and blamed and attacked. And so I feel like we have this twisted sense of power and powerlessness, where powerlessness starts to look like power on the outside. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, it shows up a couple of ways, right? We can think of the nice guy syndrome, the guy who's going to be submissive to others and try and people please. And that's a way that he manipulates and finds power. And then there's this other part, which is, I'm going to take from you. I'm going to use this stuff to basically have power over you. Yeah. And what you're saying is this is essentially two sides of the same coin, which is the guy really doesn't understand power. He doesn't understand how to work with it. And so it just reminds me of being a young boy and looking up to what I thought were powerful figures, but they were usually just macho archetypes, the Rambos.
You're the macho jerk or the new age wimp, right? They were just these macho jerks in a way.
Yeah, but it was like, if I could be that guy, if I could be Rambo, I wouldn't have to worry about feeling like, I wouldn't feel scared anymore. There was these equations that we came up with. If I just had a ton of money and I was Batman, or I was I would have an escape from this confusing place that I feel with parents or with a partner or other people at school. So we don't outgrow that necessarily. We spend our whole lives thinking, okay, if I get to this place of power, then I'll be able to escape this scary feeling.
Yes. And I love that you're saying that, right? Like, I'll be able to escape the fear of not being good enough for some people, the fear of not being lovable for other people, the fear of, what I actually want seems to be a problem for the world.
What do you mean by that? What does that mean?
Like, well, when I think about men in particular, and the way we have our culture set up. If you are in a monogamous long-term relationship, or somewhat if you're dating, I mean, this is really in the realm of sex and love and intimacy, because I think that's a big part of what the shit show is right now,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
So that's part of where I'm focusing. If you're in one of these long-term relationships or sometimes dating, like, you have a specific path to get these needs and desires met.
Sexual.
Right?
Intimate.
Sexual,
Mhm.
intimate, even affection, even touch. Like, so many of the men I work with who are single are like, I haven't been touched, my hand, my arm, I haven't had a hug in weeks, months, some of them
Wow.
years. I mean, every once in a while there's family or there's a friend, but that is, I mean, that's a horrible feeling.
Right.
And
And what I'm also getting is, like, there's that sexual touch, but there's also just that validation of I'm lovable, I'm wanted.
Yes.
And if I don't get
Right.
that need, I'm going to act out.
Yeah. And I think they get collapsed, right? I think for men, one of the only ways I've seen I mean, you tell me if this is true, as especially young men and growing up in more of the general culture, as opposed to, we've been in a slightly alternative culture, you and I, in this kind of world of transformation and workshops. But that sex gets collapsed, and men can have affection or that love or validation. Often the main way to do that is through sex.
Mm-hmm. I'm okay. If she has sex with me, I'll be okay. If she desires me, I'll feel okay. I'm going to be, it's not even necessarily sex itself. It's just that,
Right.
just that somebody finds me desirable and wanted. Where does that come from? I guess how does that play out? Is like, if I'm not getting enough of that, I'm going to seek other places and I'm just going to impose myself on others. Is that how that shows up?
I think so. I mean, when I think about it, I think, wow, okay, there are these powerful urges and, feelings and desires and sensations within our body, both men and women. And, scientists talk about testosterone as a particularly intense, hormone chemical that actually has
It's
the
like
desire.
being chained to an idiot.
Right. You've said that. I've heard you say that.
Yeah. The first 30 something years of my life, I was chained to an idiot. They were like, oh, my testosterone levels are dropping. Finally. Like, I can, I can think.
Finally, you can focus on something else.
Yeah. Other than boobs every 5 seconds. It was just
Right.
awful.
But
Not
then,
really,
okay,
but
so
yeah.
then when you pair that, right, with pretty much absence of sexual education. I was talking about this with one of my clients yesterday. He said, I'm 36 and I feel like I shouldn't be having to ask you some of these questions. And I was like, but where were you actually, where would you have gotten the answers? There's a little bit of sex education we were saying it's more like anatomy education. But did anybody ever talk to you about intimacy or emotional connection or making love? Or, my health teacher in 8th grade, it was like, have a good weekend and keep your pants on. We never had a deeper conversation about, well, why would you have sex? Or what are the other ways you can feel connected to another human being? How do we emotionally connect to each other? Because, when you're emotionally connected, the drive for sex is sometimes lessened because there are some of those ways of feeling affectionate and connected,
Yeah. The word I get is nourishment, right? And
Yeah.
so sex, on one hand, it can be nourishing to a degree, but it may not feed the other needs that I have. When I've talked to guys that have, they were pickup artists and they actually learned how to manipulate women in a certain way so that they could have sex more regularly. And they realized, I'm still empty. I'm actually not nourished by this. So there was the theory that more sex would be the thing that I would have me feel more complete and whole, but it wasn't. And so I can imagine, though, if I don't connect the dots from that, I'm just going to have to get more. I'm going to have to get more and more and more, trying to find this insatiable, trying to feed this part of me.
Right. I just had the image go through my head of like a starving hyena or a starving bear, or there's been images in the news of these starving polar bears because the ice is melting. I mean, right. Horrible things are happening on this planet too, as all of this is happening. And where, they start to come into, this might sound like a long shot, but they start to come into these human areas and scavenge and attack right?
Right.
Like they're starving, they need food somewhere. And it could be debated that sex is not a need, sex is a desire. Some people have that view. Other people have a view like, as a human being, sex is a need. But think about people who are starving. And if we put these, Maslow's hierarchy, right, we do have a need to feel connected, to feel loved, to feel affection. When we're starving for that, then we're going to do some really crazy things to get those needs met. As opposed to, I was thinking about this the other day too, as opposed to, when I know that my desires, whether they're sexual or not, like when I know that they're good and I know that I'm good innately, then I start to have this mindset of, how would I create this in the world? How would I co-create this? How would I collaborate with other people to
have sex, to enjoy those, to collaborate and create those experiences, you mean? A sexual experience?
And so we're talking about sex, but I think it goes far beyond sex, right? But sex is a very concrete example.
But if we zoom out, and what I'm getting is if this is a need and I don't actually know how to talk about or deal with this need.
Yeah. And I've never been taught, really.
I'm repressing this, I'm pushing it down, and I'm expected to act a certain way or whatever. Like it just creates this pressure container.
Yeah.
And then I don't know how to talk about this. I don't know how to speak up. I don't know how to co-create with other people and do so in a way that, hey, what would be mutual beneficial to you. It's going to start to come out in different ways that are just screwed up.
Right.
And I'm not making it right. I'm not justifying, but now we can start to understand it a bit better.
Yeah. Well, right. Because I feel like the tendency right now is to blame and shame and attack men. But if we don't actually try to understand the root of this or what's causing this, it's
going to make it worse because we're basically going to have to send it down to the basement even more.
Exactly.
Right.
And just in the past month, the conversations I've had with men have ranged from, my ex-wife is calling me a monster because I, in some ways I was out of integrity because I flirted with women, but I never did anything sexual. But, it's been 10 or 15 years since my need for affection and feeling wanted has been met. And talked to another man who has had a relationship for 30 years with his wife and has been too scared to talk about sex, which,
wow.
I mean, all of these, right? You could say, okay, a man needs to get some help or get some support, or, it's in his own integrity to be able to say what he wants and have these conversations, or maybe he should leave the relationship. But then I think about how we raise our boys in this day and age, how many of the men now were raised. Like, suck it up. Don't admit when you're feeling scared or when you don't know what you're doing. Man
or even
up.
Acknowledge that you have a desire or a need that indicates some kind of weakness.
Exactly. It's a very complicated bind to be put inside of.
Don't look stupid. Don't appear needy. Don't appear vulnerable in any way. But the reality is, I have a need here. This is really strong for me.
Which is vulnerable.
Right. It's the truth. It's the truth. I have these needs. I have these desires. And I got to figure out how to work with this stuff. But I've got to do so in a certain way where I don't lose face. I've got to maintain this image.
That's what it looks like.
Right.
Because it looks like if I'm vulnerable, I lose face. If I admit some of these things, I lose face. And as I work with men and help them find that place inside where I think the source of their power comes from, which is, it's okay that I want this. It's okay that I need this. And I'm sex or whatever else, right? Whatever it may be. Then it translates into this ability to say almost anything, right?
There's a real power there. If we're willing to go through this place that may look like losing face, then it opens up to all sorts of possibilities. But to this very, I'm going to say young, underdeveloped part of ourselves, it looks like death. It looks like this is where we're going to be cast out of the crowd. We're going to be seen as weak. I know men that would rather stay in a really screwed up situation in their lives rather than own what's going on for themselves and get help with it. It's the guy that won't ask for directions. It's the guy that won't go to the doctor. I'm going to raise my hand. I don't like going to the doctor, but there's just things where it's just like, I don't want to have to look at myself or see myself in this way. I don't want to see those things. So I'll just continue to be ignorant and suffer. Like I'll just keep tolerating this stuff. But you're pointing us in the direction to say, well, if you're willing to look at this stuff and deal with it, then real power shows. Power with a capital P shows up. I don't need to submit or people please in order to get things, which a lot of guys do. These big tough guys that say, "Oh, my wife runs the house," kind of thing. Got a happy wife, happy life kind of thing. It's just like they don't know how to co-create with their wife. Or the other version, which is I have to dominate. I have to domineer in order to get what I want.
Right. And part of what I see in that is one of those is heart-based and one of those is kind of sex, or sometimes I call it balls, right? Like the head, heart, and balls, or the head, heart, and sex. It's like we have these centers or these ways that we come to the world or relate to the world. Like if I'm a very heart-centered person, as a man, I'm going to try to love and care for the people around me. This is where sometimes the nice guy syndrome comes. If it's not balanced with that power or sexual power, which I think, again, goes way beyond sex. It's more just this innate sense of capacity and I can handle anything that comes my way, right? And then the other side is the men you were talking about who have more that power, but it's not balanced by their heart and their care.
It's not considerate. It's not that it doesn't have appreciation for where the other person's coming from, which seems to point to why some guys can seemingly flirt and get away with it. And why others, when they flirt, it's like, get out of here. You're disgusting, or you're creepy or whatever. And so, you could write down what was said and two guys can say the same thing. But one guy's it's going to be fine. And the other one is, so you're speaking to that now, which is, that one guy is able to speak up to it because he's showing consideration. He's showing appreciation. He gets that there's a human being here and she has her desires and has her boundaries too.
Yeah. And she's not just here for my own needs and my own pleasure. She's actually here as another human being, like you're saying, with her needs and her desires and her fears and her concerns, right? And
I don't just see her as a way to like get something. Like, how do I get her to have sex with me? How do I get her to whatever, fill in the blank.
Exactly.
Okay. That's a huge one. We could talk all day about that thing right there, because a lot of guys are looking like, what do I do? We look at our behaviors. We look at, what did I say? Just even like the words that we said, we don't really get where it's coming from, or if the other person is feeling seen or appreciated, or that there's a human being there. And I like to just, for guys that struggle with this and they don't really get it, like think of that sales guy that walks up to you from the kiosk in the mall and he starts this conversation and you're just like, oh God. And even though the guy's being nice and he says like, how's your day going and all this kind of stuff, right, you might feel this like
cringing inside.
Right. Because the guy just sees me as a sale. I'm just another number for that. And so I think as guys, we can get that part of it. And then we can start to imagine what it's like to be a woman on the other side of that, and recognizing there's a lot of dudes walking up to her in the mall, like giving her some version of that energy and that approach. Can you speak to that?
Right. I was going to say also, because I want to point to the other side, which is so many men I've worked with who've said, I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to be that asshole. I'm actually almost trying to make up for that man existing.
I'm going to be invisible. I'm going to be
I'm going to be invisible. Exactly. I'm going to shut down my sexual desire. And I want to point to the difference between desires or sensations in your body and then your actions, right? Because one of the things I work with men is you're feeling attraction or desire is a kind of nourishment in your body when you let it happen. And you get to decide what you want to do with that, right? So, I mean, I've had men, sit in sessions with me and just talk about how they're like, well, I shouldn't let myself feel any pleasure in my body, or I shouldn't let myself feel attraction, because that's going to feel shitty to her. That's going to feel like I'm disrespecting her. That's going to be
to just have a natural, she walks in the room, I feel a certain way, I got to shut this down.
I've got to shut this down immediately. And my stance is no, feel it, feel the pleasure, feel the desire, feel that nourishment. And a lot of there's a skill to be able to expand, I think, to hold that much energy in your body without taking action on it, right? It's kind of similar to the energy during sex where it's like the energy rises and rises and rises, and a lot of people want to just, orgasm.
Yeah, get rid of
right.
it. Well, as
To
boys, we train ourselves to do that. We feel attraction, masturbate, ejaculate,
Right.
get rid of that.
Rid of it.
Right.
So there is a skill to learn to actually be able to hold that much energy coursing through your body, feeling open, being able to still speak and communicate, and not having to do anything with it, right? The disrespect happens not in you feeling that way, but in how you take that and act.
All right. So let's paint the picture. So beautiful woman walks in the room. This guy gets turned on. What happens when he collapses and I imagine him he looks away. What's it like for you when you've noticed a man that shuts down? Do you feel like, oh, thank God he's shutting it down and I don't have to experience his turn on? Like, what's it like for you?
Well, I just want to then also bring in my own sense as a woman of, God, I wish this wasn't true, but I had an experience the other day where I was just like, I am so terrified of being rejected that I'm in my own struggle over here.
Right.
So sometimes when a man totally shuts down, I just take it as like, I'm over the hill. I'm not wanted anymore.
Oh God. So there's a whole other side that is, guys, we're just not getting. Okay.
There's a whole other side. And I actually,
but what if you get a sense that he is turned on and now he's kind of ratcheting it down or he's like, oh, he's pushing it down. Cause I've done that for sure.
It's confusing. I mean, I start to feel a tension in my body. And I the way I talk about this a lot is like a lot of women feel these things. Not all women have trained themselves to be able to put words to what's happening. Mm-hmm. So I start to feel a tension or a confusion in my body of like,
what's going on?
It's not comfortable. Yeah. What's going on? My spidey sense goes off. It's like there's something happening and I can't quite make sense of it. And
it's like there was a conversation happening about me but nobody's talking about it. Like there's just a sense. Well,
exactly.
Yeah.
And this is what you're saying. Like there's so much happening beneath the level of what you do and what you say, which is really what I focus on with men. Mm-hmm. And so this is pointing to it, right? Like women have this sense of something's happening here and it's confusing and it's making my spidey sense go off and I don't feel safe necessarily.
So that's interesting because that's what's happening more and more is stuff it, push it down. Yeah. It's not appropriate to actually feel this stuff, right? You're just even talking about what you're feeling this stuff versus acting out on it. And so the impact of that behavior is that for you at least, and I think that this is true for a lot of women, is that they don't feel safe at that level. They may feel safe, like, okay, he's not going to do anything, at least in that moment. Who knows, right? But that probably creates the scenario where he will do something. He will act out in another way.
Exactly.
But even just that sense is like, oh, why is it uncomfortable to be around me? This is speaking to that. Like where there's just a felt sense it doesn't feel good or natural to be there. And it's not about your sexual desires, the fact that we can't own that sexual desire and just let it be there in our body. Is that right?
Right. Because on the other hand, or another way is when a man's actually letting himself feel that pleasure, that lightness, that turn on, whatever it is, right? Then he brings, if he's connected with his heart and he's not trying to just get rid of that energy by, taking some really bold action or trying to make it okay. Like if he feels wrong about it, he's going to, I think it's David Data who talks about it's like a kink in a hose. And when you unkink the hose, it just it sprays all over the place versus, oh, I'm starting to feel this energy in my body. It's actually really pleasurable. There's nothing I need to do here except kind of feel nourished by it. Mm-hmm. And then I can have a conversation with this woman. And if I use this phrasing a lot, and I don't know if this is going to make sense in this moment, but I often use this phrasing of like, what's the highest good for this connection right now? And a lot of the men I've worked with have actually felt relieved by that. Because then instead of going on a date or being in a moment where it's like, are you the one or are you not the one? Are we going to have sex? Or are we not going to have sex? Right? Like, what actually is the best thing that could come out of this for both of us? then we could be in a conversation, each of us could be feeling some energy in our body. Maybe there's something delightful about it. Maybe there's something that feels nervous about it, but we're not taking it to the point of, God, we've got to do something with this, or we've got to solidify this, or if from a scarcity place, you're the only person who I think I could have sex with or affection with or something like that with. So I've got to nail this down.
Right. We've got to do so. I've got this energy in my body. Now I have to do something with it instead of, can I just allow this? This is what's happening in my body now. This is very similar tension that happens when we're laughing. We're at a comedy. Like, imagine if you weren't able to laugh in a comedy club, you'd go nuts, right? Like your body would you'd just explode somewhere. That energy comes out. But I don't think we realize, like, oh my gosh, I'm laughing now. I have to do something with this. This means I have to, this means I'm not attracted to my wife anymore. This means like whatever. It's just, I just have a lot of energy in my body right now. And that's okay. I can I could train myself I can expand that capacity to be with that energy. I don't have to necessarily act out on it, and I don't have to hide it and stuff it and become creepy and weird about it either. I could just sit and so what does it look like for you when you see a man that's owning that energy and he's right with that, but he's also not coming at you and being like, I'm really turned on and I want to fuck you right now. So like,
right. Well, right. Cause then what happens, and a lot of the men I've worked with have found that this is the case, is that then sitting there having a conversation, whether we're looking into each other's eyes or maybe there's a little bit of touching like fingers or hands or, but even without that, just even talking or sitting in the same space together can feel as pleasurable, I would say, as even having sex, right? Even having a physical, sexual, genital experience. Most people, I think, don't realize that you can, when you're allowing that much energy and you're connecting with another person who's also allowing that much energy, you can be having a very intellectual or very, just a regular conversation, but the energy can be so strong and so pleasurable that it's like you're making out, even if you're not. Right. And so sometimes, I've had experiences where sometimes it's very clear, like, wow, we're both feeling this energy and one of us is in a relationship or, there's some other reason why it's not going to go anywhere. But from a place of integrity, one of us or both of us has admitted like, wow, I'm feeling this energy. And nothing's going to happen with it. But can I just recognize that this is my own body? I get to feel whatever pleasure I'm feeling, right? And it doesn't even have anything to do with, it doesn't have to have anything to do with you necessarily, the person sitting across from me. So I think when men don't let themselves feel, and women too, when we don't let ourselves feel that kind of pleasure that another person can evoke in us, we cut ourselves off from some of what you were talking about, that nourishment.
It's just another form of power. It's like all this energy, it becomes vitality, it turns into creative energy. Like It's like, I want to go do something with this energy now, not just go,
Right. And that's what I think of when I think of sexual power or sexual energy. To me, it's just life force and life energy.
Exactly.
Right. It happens to be generated by a sensation that happens in our genitals. But when you actually expand it beyond that, it's vitality and energy.
For sure. There's a guy that's experiencing his turn on, and I'll say he's right with it. He's allowing it. What's it like for you to be around that? Even if you're not interacting with him, and I don't want you to expand your viewpoint because you're different. You're different from a lot of women. There's women that have been traumatized. There's women that are going to see a man's turn on from another place. So I don't know how you can speak to these different perspectives, but one person is going to feel like, oh, great, now he's feeling this. Another woman's going to be terrified. Is that right?
Well, yes, I think that's true. And right, and women who have been traumatized and had really negative experiences sexually, they've got more barriers or things to work through to be able to feel relaxed or to feel safe or to feel trustworthy or to trust a man. But I think the thing I want to point out in there too is just because you're feeling pleasure in your body, a woman may not even know that, right? Or like she might have a sense of it, that something feels good and relaxed, but she doesn't necessarily have a sense that you're feeling all of this energy pulsing through your body and you don't have to talk about it. And in a women's workshop I led, I remember this one woman who was saying like she felt really embarrassed because she felt a lot of sexual energy running through her body. And she was afraid that men would know that and then would judge her as being too much or too slutty or too forward or something. And we ended up giving her this nickname in the workshop, Secret Orgasm. And it was like, you can feel all of this. You don't have to let anybody know, but it's your own, vitality and pleasure in your own body.
Okay. So I can go through my day and I can have this experience. I don't necessarily have to communicate it with the other person. I certainly don't need to act out on it, but we want to move away from, oh my God, I'm having all this intensity in my body. I need to stuff it. It's wrong. It's bad.
Yeah. Right. And so going back to your question of what's it like for me to be with a man who's allowing that, I mean, there's a whole range, but ultimately it lands in a place of, I feel more relaxed. I feel more at ease. I feel often like, oh, I can feel my own pleasure in my body. I'm aware of my body, not just my head or my mind or my thoughts.
Why is that relaxing to you?
Well, part of it is pleasure is relaxing, right? So I believe we're like tuning forks and we can feel each other. And so, if you walk in a room and there's someone there who's really mad and angry, you might notice, right? Your body tenses up and
something's going on in here. Yeah.
Something's going on. I have to kind of be on the defense or I have to be careful or right. But when someone's more in a space of feeling pleasure or ease in their own body, we can kind of, match that, or we just do, like as a tuning fork, we kind of tune into that. So I think that's why it has me able to relax, is because there's actually a person across from me who's feeling pleasure and relaxation. Now, I feel like I'm responsible for my own state and I can feel that on my own, right? I can feel pleasure and relaxation as I'm walking around in the world. And as a really sensitive woman who's trained herself to pay attention, I notice how I feel different with each person I interact with.
I'm glad you spoke up about the responsibility piece, because there's a thing of like, I don't want to make her feel this way. I don't want to make you feel this way. And there's a lot of that taking responsibility for other people's experience. That's
state or experience.
Yeah, it's the typical nice guy syndrome, right? I'm responsible for other people and that kind of thing. And so I think it's a powerful part here. That's why I wanted to stick to this individual conversation today about taking responsibility for ourselves, taking responsibility for the intensity in our body. And then people are going to react however they react, but you don't need to stuff it. And you certainly don't need to act out and impose anything on anybody.
Right. And if you're really sincere and a woman has a reaction and is just like, why are you feeling so good? Or, or why are you feeling
why do you have a
turned
boner?
On?
Like what?
Right?
Yeah.
Right. Or it's like, then if you're really sincere about, well, I could stuff this feeling in my body. I could try to tamp it down, but actually, I'm feeling pleasure. I'm feeling energy in my body and I don't need anything from you. I'm not trying to take anything from you. I don't need you to have a certain experience around me, right? I mean, you don't have to explain or defend yourself, but I think those are some of the things that if a woman challenged you or said like, what's wrong with you? I've heard of women saying, well, what's wrong with you? And, you think you have a right to me or my body. And these are some really great men who are like, I don't, that's not what I want. But now I feel like I have to be defensive or.
You have to prove a negative, essentially. Like I'm not this thing.
Right.
I want to try to stay out of the hypotheticals and more just getting a window into what it's like on this end. And there's definitely more of a message of like, ooh, you better turn it down, cut this stuff off. It's not safe. It's going to get your ass in hot water. I don't want us to lose that vitality. I don't want us to lose that sense of energy and power. And I also don't want us to resort to, well, I better not make sure I don't have power over and I'm trying to manipulate people that way by them becoming submissive and I'm losing that sense, because I don't think that's going to create very good relationships going forward either. So it's about this co-creating piece of, hey, this is what's going on for me, what's going on for you, and recognizing that there's a human being there with just her own desires and wants and needs, and also boundaries. Like just recognize that's it. But I think the takeaway is if I don't need that, I may want that. I may really want it right now. I may really feel that.
Really want it.
But the place to impose that, or I actually don't need her to be the one to do that for me or take care of me in that way.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that's tricky. I remember being a younger man in college, and I'd be fine sitting at the bar, whatever, and a beautiful girl would walk in, and suddenly I was not okay anymore. Really
Right.
not okay. Like I was really disturbed and just like, oh my God, like this incredibly frustrating pent up feeling. And it just rippled out through my whole life of just not okayness. And somehow, and yeah, it's just a wild situation. So I could imagine being with a coworker and having that attraction day in and day out and struggling with that energy and not knowing what to do and being in a real bind.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting, and this feels vulnerable for me to say, but, you know, I had an experience where for the past month or so, going through a breakup, the energy in my body was really low. And, you know, I tend to walk around in the world pretty turned on and feeling a lot of sensual energy. And it's not necessarily always with people. It's just like, oh, the wind and the sun and you know, I'm one of these women. And for the past month or so, like that was very dampened. And I
Just
felt
because of the breakup.
Yeah, because of the breakup. And I think my heart has been heavy, and, you know, and I felt grateful in a way. I was like, wow, this is not as distracting. I think I relate to what you said, right? Like, oh, I'm not being driven by this sensual or sexual desire. And then this week that's like my body started to come more online as my heart started to open a little bit more. And I remember this morning I actually went out for a walk, and I was like, whoa, I'm feeling so much energy in my body. And I was like, fuck, this is bad in a way. And then I was like, no, it's not actually bad. It's actually really good.
Why did you think it was bad?
Because it's a lot to feel.
Oh.
It's almost uncomfortable to have all this energy in my body and realize there's no place I'm likely to have sex anytime soon.
Oh.
Like, I'm not in a relationship anymore. I'm not really dating yet, you know? So it's a lot to, when I tense or kind of clench around this energy, it feels kind of like you were saying, that frustrated, oh God, like I want to get some need met.
Mm-hmm.
But as I was walking and I was like, okay, what if I actually just breathe into this? What if I enjoy this? Then it actually becomes this pleasurable experience of like, I'm already having the pleasure in my body that I would seek through having a sexual experience. Does that make sense?
Well, really?
Yeah.
Like the sex would be pretty good too.
Well, sure, the sex would be really good, but it's not an absence. It's not a pain that I'm feeling in my body. It's actually so much energy or pleasure that it starts to feel painful, that somehow it's not going to be met, but this might be getting confusing, but it's already pleasure.
Well, turn on is another high. I think that, you know, instead of it being like a burden, like, I'm carrying around this burden, right? And it's not going to get met. I've noticed that I just enjoy being turned on.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. You're just saying it in a much simpler, more easily digestible way.
But there is just because it can happen for me. I work from home. I see my wife. I see my daughter. I really don't see the world. And so I can kind of get into a groove and realize I need some stimulation. I need to kind of just see some new sights, get out and that kind of thing. And it's just like such a pleasure. Like, oh, I'm feeling my turn on again in a different way than it's just some more variety and some novelty there. And it's a pleasure to feel that, even though I don't attach like, oh my gosh, now I've got to have, you know, relief from this, like seeing it as
but that's why it's pleasure for you. Because if you do start to attach, I've got to get relief from this. I've got to get over this and back to this lower state of calm, then it becomes a problem, right? Or it becomes more painful.
Yeah. I want to pivot because I brushed up against something there a minute ago.
Yeah.
About a scenario where a guy's at work and he's got a coworker and there's tension there. He's turned on and there's frequent, consistent contact and the energy's building. And it's one of those scenarios where there's a lot at stake and there might be some, you know, he's stuffing it down kind of thing.
Yeah.
What can we do to help that guy out? Where it's not safe it doesn't feel safe to express this tension or energy.
Yeah.
Either because it'll damage a relationship or it'll damage his professional situation. Is there something we could do to help that guy out?
Yeah, I love that question because I do have men who come to me and, that's part of what we're working with is like, oh my God, I'm around this woman every day and I do feel turned on and I'm drawn to her, but I don't want to threaten her or my work. I don't want to be seen as, someone who harasses. And so, the first part I would say is having somewhere you can go to actually talk about it is huge.
Just to be able to say,
right?
I'm so turned on by this woman at work.
Yes. Because often when we have, and I've had this with men too, like they have these fantasies that they've never spoken to anybody and they have so much pull or energy because they've never been spoken. And once they get spoken, it's like taking some of the air out of the balloon, right? So if you're really drawn to a woman in the workplace, but you're not talking about it and you feel like it's bad, it's wrong, you shouldn't admit it, to another soul, then you start to have more tension around it. And it's
like putting a lid on a boiling pot.
Exactly.
Just gets more pressure. Okay. So find somebody where it's safe to talk about this and just to express it and just get it out in the open. Yeah. That'll move some energy.
Which might be a male friend, which might be a men's circle, or it might be, a coach like you or me or someone who they're working with where they can admit these things that might be seen as shameful.
And I would say not looking where somebody's going to give you advice on what to do, but just looking for a place to just let it go. Let some of this gas out. Let some of the steam off. All right. So talking to somebody about that. Great. So, all right, you still got to go to work the next day and be with this gal. Mm-hmm. What happens? Mm-hmm.
Ultimately, I think what we've been talking about the experience, like the willingness to feel the pleasure in your body without having to do anything with it, and actually finding the capacity to expand your ability to have more energy in your body and have that be your baseline instead of this kind of lower state, that can also really help.
And I found that doing high intensity physical stuff is great for that. Pushing ourselves, training ourselves, like when the brain says no more, I can't do it. And obviously I
can't do it.
Yeah. It's different than, my knee's going to explode. It's different from that. There's just a part of the intensity where it's like, I don't want to deal with intensity. You start to recognize I can handle a lot of intensity, whether it's physical from being on the bike and sprinting for 30 seconds or the intensity of, wow, she just walked in the room and she smells amazing today.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. Another practice that physically is really helpful is to start to put some attention on your feet and your legs and your arms, which, this may sound bizarre as you're hearing it, but a lot of the energy that happens when we're attracted to someone, it's in our genitals, it's in our belly, it's in our kind of chest and our heart. Like the center of our body is where there's a lot of that energy buzzing around, tingling around, right? And for some reason, I keep wondering about the science of this, but it works and it's worked for me and hundreds of people I've worked with. It's like, as you start to actually put more attention on your legs and your arms and you really feel the sensation in those parts of your body, the energy that is stuck in the center of your body or just like it's in a small container starts to be able to spread out and move, and so then the particles aren't bumping up against each other as intensely.
Yeah.
And there's some relief and relaxation in that way.
Yeah. Go knock out some squats. Go knock out some air squats or some push-ups. Move that energy. I like what you're saying. Like recognize that this is just like stuck, trapped energy in your body. So move it. Go find ways to move this. Think about after
and you can move
difficult.
it physically.
Yeah.
I was going to say you can move it physically, but you can also move it with your attention. I think that's one of those Jedi skills that, once you learn it, you can do that really well, but you could even just sit there and move it with your attention.
Find it, right? Find where that energy is in your body. At that point, a lot of times we're just stuck in our head.
Yeah.
But actually, where is it? Oh, it's in my throat or it's in my chest or it's in my groin or it's in my belly. Yeah. And then start to visualize it moving into other areas of the body. I like that. Yeah. And imagine like, we don't feel this way after an intense workout, right? Because we've been able to expel and move that energy. So again, come back to this physical component because really what we're up against here is dealing with this tension in our body. And if we don't experience this tension, then we're not going to get always like, oh my God, what do I do with it?
Right.
And make a dumb decision.
Right. I mean, this part, I don't really have an answer. Like, it's often not a good idea to go to this person and talk about it or say something unless you've developed a kind of relationship where, you've kind of stuck your toe in the water and you've each shared some truths with each other and you've seen that it's okay. And you know what I mean? I mean, I think it takes a lot to be able to have that conversation in a way that's effective and isn't going to kind of, what is that, like rock the apple cart, or it's like it's a tricky situation.
Yeah, and I like this too, is it's not dependent upon, well, I need her response to be a certain way for this to be okay. Yes. I just want to help. I want to make sure we're not stuffing anything, and that we're learning how to manage this tension and work with it. And I like the idea of it empowering us and invigorating us and enlivening us, instead of, oh, well, either stuff it or I act out and do something dumb and I'm fired.
Right. And I have a client who I'm working with, and he said, like, God, sometimes I feel like it's so weird that this woman in my office is taking up so much of my attention. And I'm like, whatever it is, it doesn't seem weird to me. And she's kind of an archetype for you, right? And so you're getting to practice bringing all of this fear, concern, etc. Like, then we talk about it in our session. I give him some practices to go back and to be able to have more straightforward conversations, not in the realm of I'm attracted to you, just in the realm of like, oh, I can be a clear and honest, human being with this other person. So we really get to look at the patterns of, I may be a man who holds back, or I'm a man who, I don't think I can say what's real for me in the moment. Like we were talking about this man was saying like, oh, there's a picture of her. I think it's her boyfriend in her cubicle. And I was like, okay, well, have you asked her? And he said no. And he was scared of a couple of things. And I was like, okay, well, so, nothing to do with her. What we then get to see is you have a fear of just being straightforward, or, you know what I mean? Of facing like what is here to be talked about. And so again, I think you get to find whatever she represents for you. There is a way of, like you just said, oh, I get to be more empowered as I learn more about myself and the ways I hold back and the ways I feel wrong, and then we get to work with that.
Yeah. I like that. Like I get to, instead of, oh my gosh, there she is, I look at the ground and I run the other way. I get to learn how to show up in that place and be more powerful. Exactly. I get to see her as a human being. I don't have to go and put her down or something in order to feel better about myself because I don't feel powerful. There's just, we're starting to point to this other possibility that's there for men when we start to own this energy and learn how to deal with it, and also recognize that there's other human beings with their own desires and wants and boundaries. So, I love this. I love that you're doing this work. I love that I've been able to support you a bit on this too. Where, if somebody's listening to this and they want to get more information about you, where do we tell them to go?
Yeah, you can go to my website, shanajamescoaching.com. I'm really working with, I think, a new and deeper framework where, sometimes men are feeling powerful in their leadership, but then in love, like, oh my God, I'm not getting my needs and my affection met.
Right.
Or there's a sense of, wow, I have this really amazing relationship, but in my career, I'm stuck, or I'm plateauing, or I'm not taking that next step, or, and then I'm finding a lot of men as I get older, I'm calling in a lot of men who are like, all right, I've accomplished some great things in my life, and is this all there is? I want to feel a sense of meaning and purpose, and I actually want to leave something after I'm gone. And so, talking more about the realm of legacy. So yeah, I feel excited about supporting men with power in all of these different realms.
Right. I love it. I love that you're taking a stand for healthy power too. Power's been getting a pretty bad rap lately. So I love that you're flying the flag for that and being such an ally to me and to other men. So thank you so much, my dear.
Thank you.
If these interviews are helping you, then please visit The New Man on iTunes and leave us a positive review so others can discover the show more easily. Thanks for listening.